Hello, my name's Joanne Grenfell and I'm the Bishop of Stepney in the Diocese of London. I'm here with Alison Tsang from Capital Mass, which is a joint venture between the Diocese and the Church Urban Fund. Alison isn't a financial advisor, but she is a real expert in sorting out money matters with other people, and especially in helping churches who are trying to help other people who are suffering from financial hardship. We know that lots of people have got worries at this time, and so we're going to talk through some of those really big concerns and point you in direction of resources that might be available. So, Alison, hi. Tell us a bit about your role and about your work at the moment.
So my role is one of the areas that I work in around Capital Mass is supporting churches with money, with debt, helping people talk about money a bit more, helping people who are struggling with money. We know that money is such a fundamental part of life. And yet we don't talk about it very much, and it can cause huge amounts of stress and anxiety. And there are some brilliant churches all over the diocese doing debt advice, doing money management courses, doing budgeting. And so in normal times, that's what I do, I support churches doing that and meet with churches who want to start doing that. But obviously we're not in normal times. So recently my role has been, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've been putting on a couple of webinars for people both within the diocese and anywhere else as well, with some colleagues in Birmingham, looking at what happens in a time of coronavirus, what happens to our money, how do we talk about it, and how specifically can we as the church, with the relationships that we've got, help people, just get alongside people and help them in a time that's not only worrying for our health, but also people really worried financially about how they're going to manage.
That's great. Thanks, Alison. So could you tell us, first of all, what is income shock and what do we do if people we know have lost their income?
Yeah, sure. So income shock is basically when you think you've got enough money coming in and suddenly you haven't. And that often can be to do with bereavement or losing a job very suddenly. Obviously, at the moment, an awful lot of people have had a very, very sudden income shock that wasn't predicted. So people haven't had savings, they haven't sort of been able to taper things off, they haven't stopped or changed their lifestyles at all. They've just suddenly dropped off a cliff. It might be because their business has gone under. It might be because they've been made redundant because there's no longer any work. Obviously, it might be that they've been furloughed even, because that's another thing we'll come on to, but people might have not been able to work the way they thought they could work. And so that's what income shock is. And it's affecting so many people. This is a huge number of people across the spectrum, from the very low income to the very high income. And it doesn't matter how much you had coming in, if you suddenly haven't got it coming in, it's a real worry and a real stress. So what we can do to help people is there's a lot of things we can do. There's some brilliant resources out there, and we're going to talk through those over the next few minutes. But really, just to reassure people, there are solutions, there are things you can do, and there are places you can go, people you can talk to, and don't keep it to yourself. Don't worry is the first thing I suppose to say. The government have announced, as people probably have heard, a lot of different possibilities that you can do if you have had an income shock, and they're for specific different groups of people. So we can go through those groups in a minute. And for some people, there isn't actually a government solution, but there is always the benefit system which people can apply for, which we'll talk a bit about as well.
Thanks. So could you tell us first of all then about the help that the government has announced and how people can access that?
Yes, absolutely. And this is a bit changeable because it's been announced, and it's extraordinary how quickly the government have produced these responses. So, bear in mind these things are changeable. But the first thing people may well have heard of is if they're employed, if you pay your tax by PAYE, which means you get your money from your company weekly or monthly, and then your tax is taken off at source, so you don't see your tax. That's called PAYE. And if you're a PAYE employee, then you can, if you no longer can work because, for example, there isn't any work to do, or if you've got children at home and you're caring for them and you can't work because of that, or if you've got any other reason that at the moment you're not able to work from home, you can ask your employer to furlough you. And these words that we suddenly have heard of in the last few weeks and all become very familiar with. What that means is that basically the government will pay 80% of your salary to your employer that they will then pass on to you. So you can stop work, you get paid 80%. Your company can top you up to 100% if they're able to, but there's no expectation that will happen. But effectively, you're sort of going to standby. It's like putting a TV on standby. I think that's what Martin Lewis, the money saving expert, that's how he explained it. I think it's a really good explanation. So you're sort of paused, your job's paused, and you get 80% of your salary, but then you're not expected to do any work. And actually, you're not allowed to do any work for your company during that time. That's one really key thing. So you can't work, but you could get another job. So if, for example, you're working at a restaurant and that's closed, but you could get a job as a delivery driver, then actually that means you can keep an income coming in and you'll still get the 80%. So that's the furlough scheme. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. What if you're not employed, or what if you're not self-employed either? What about, you know, how does it work?
Yes, sure. So if you're self-employed and you do a tax return every year, so you do your self-assessment return, there's going to be some coverage for you, but not till June, unfortunately. So if you have a business that you're running, like you're maybe a freelancer and you've got a self-employment income coming in, so long as over 50% of your income is from that, you will automatically receive a grant at the end of June, which will be calculated about roughly 80% of your earnings over the last 3 years, and that will just come to you automatically. HMRC will just contact you about that and deliver that to you. So people have got that promised coming, and also you can still work. So you can, if you're self-employed, say you've got a business that you are able to run from home, you can still work and you'll also get that money. So for people who are self-employed that way, there's actually a bit of hope. Obviously bills need to be paid before June, so we'll come on to that in a minute. There are some gaps in the system. One of the big gaps that's been talked about quite a lot is if you're a limited company and you pay yourself by dividend. Those people aren't covered at the moment, and there's a lot of questions about whether there might be something coming up. But at the moment, that isn't covered. The only advice there would be that if you are a limited company and you pay yourself by dividend, but you also take a small PAYE salary, you could furlough yourself. Effectively, you're allowed to do that. But there's a lot more information about this on lots of different websites, and we will signpost you to those, and we've got some resources we can send out to people around that. So I don't want to go into too much detail because it all is changing, but that's pretty much the overall thing for different people in different jobs.
Thank you. You also mentioned that some people might need to rely on benefits, and I guess I'm thinking especially about universal credit. I imagine quite a lot of people might suddenly be relying on that who wouldn't have been before. Who's eligible, and how can we help people know how to go about getting that?
Universal credit will be a big catch-all for a lot of people, and there's no shame in applying for benefits. I've had several people say to me, oh no, well I can't possibly apply for benefits, it's not the sort of thing that I would imagine myself doing. There's absolutely no shame at all. That's what the system's there for.
We all pay into it, so we can all
exactly. It's like saying I wouldn't want to go to hospital. Of course you do when you need to. So universal credit, you may have heard about. It's the new sort of benefits. The way that they've reorganised the benefit system is that 6 previous benefits you might have heard of, things like housing benefit, job seekers allowance, working tax credits, have all been rolled into one, and it's called universal credit. So things you might have heard of before, you don't apply for those anymore, you have to apply for universal credit. It's a one-off payment at the end of every month, rather than getting lots of little bits. You're eligible if you are of working age, and if you're either out of work or you're on an income that isn't going to cover your expenditure. So it's not just if you're not working. So if you've suddenly taken a massive drop in income, apply, see whether you can get it. You can only get it if you've got less than £16,000 in savings. So if you have over £16,000, the assumption is that you'll use those to live on. But if you've got less than £16,000 and you're not earning enough to cover your expenditure, you should try applying. So it's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of good stuff out there around universal credit, but basically there's some really good websites that you can go and sit and watch how you apply. There's some support. The Systems Advice have got some excellent guides on how to apply for universal credit. But if we want to help people, I think really just helping people along as they apply is a really nice, good thing to be able to do. It's all online. So you need certain documents, you need certain information, you need to have an email address, you need to be able to access the internet quite regularly, because not only do you apply online, but you communicate about your benefit online as well. So ensuring people have got internet access and they've got set up themselves with email addresses and that kind of thing, that's something perhaps we can help people with. Yeah. It's quite a lengthy process to apply. You apply online, effectively you put an application in, and you apply online. You need to put in quite a lot of information, including your address, the address of your landlord if you're paying rent, how much rent you're paying. So certain things you can help people to get together as well. So it might be that you help them find their national insurance number or help them find out how to do that kind of thing. So get that information ready. You apply online. When you click submit, there's then a 5-week wait to your first payment. And that's something, again, that's been in the news quite a lot. But you apply, and then you have to wait 5 weeks. So that's why I'd say, just even if you're not sure you're eligible for it, apply now, because you've not lost anything, and then because you've still got to wait those 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So
Can I just take you back a bit? So if you were part of a church and somebody was saying to you, can you help me with this? I think we all know people who, because they can't afford it, or maybe they're older and they've not had the training, they can't do the internet. So could you maybe help them by getting them to assemble the information and then talking down the phone and doing some of that with them? Other ways around this for people who can't go to an internet cafe or a public library at the moment? What would you do in that situation?
It's a very difficult one, because particularly when it comes to financial information, we have to be really careful that we're not asking people to share their personal financial information with us unless they're really happy to do that and they've given express permission. So I'd suggest that what you could do is actually help them apply online, perhaps maybe have a phone call with them while they apply, and they can ask you questions and you can help talk them through that. There's a really good YouTube channel which actually you can sit in. It sounds really geeky and sad, but you can sit and watch the application happen and how to do each section, and it shows you how to submit information, what happens if there's a problem, and you can help them maybe sit and watch that with them, sort of not physically.
And if they've not got internet themselves at home, where could they go to access that?
Well, that's a difficult
one. At the moment.
Yeah, that's a very difficult one. This is one of the issues, is a lot of people who are digitally excluded. There isn't really a solution to that at the moment, I don't think. We previously would have said, and we've done quite a lot of supporting people around universal credit already, you'd go to an internet cafe, you might go to your local library, but obviously those places aren't open.
So I suppose it's like, which is the least worst thing to do in the circumstances, and you need to make a judgment, maybe take some advice and be really sure if you have got consent that you've definitely got it, and that only really carefully checked people with DBSs from your church are doing anything like this with people, because we don't want to make vulnerable people, put them in a more difficult situation by exposing them to fraud. So be really careful, take advice, and then in a sense do the best thing you can in the circumstances.
Absolutely. And we just have to protect ourselves, but also the people that we're trying to help. Just one thing on that though, Citizens Advice have been given some support by the government to do something called Help to Claim, and they have advisors both online and on the phone, and they've got capacity to help people, and it's a very good system. So if you have got someone who's really struggling, if you feel like, actually I can't do this, I can't help enough, definitely I would suggest recommending the Help to Claim number. It's a free phone number, and they've got advisors who can talk people through things.
That's great, and we can make that available as well in the notes that go with this video.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If people are really stuck during that 5-week wait, which is a long time when you've got money and you've got bills coming in and you've got to feed yourself, maybe there's children to feed, the normal expenses of life to some extent, to a large extent, just carry on, rent, all of that as well. Where would you point people to go and think about that? What help is available? What can they do?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a sort of cash flow thing, isn't it? It's an issue of like, what do I do right now? I've got all these things coming up in the future. The first thing is, if you are applying for universal credit, part of the system is you can ask for an advance. An advance is actually a loan, so you're borrowing, but you're borrowing from the money that you'll then get paid month by month by month. So you can ask for an advance for up to 100% of what the estimate is that you'll get. So say you put all your details in and you're eligible for, I don't know, £800 a month. You can borrow up to that £800 straight away and you get it immediately. And that will then be taken off each of your awards, as they call them. The money you get every month is called an award. Each of your awards, you'll get a little bit taken off to repay that. So that's definitely a possibility, and it's a 0% interest. It's an interest-free loan. So if you do need money, you can ask for an advance through universal credit. But I think if you're not applying for universal credit, or if you're not happy to get that loan, which is fine, or actually you need a bit more, there are various things you can do. I think the first thing I'd say is, at the moment, everybody is in financial crisis. Everybody is in income shock in some level. And there's a lot of recognition from a lot of the utility bills and providers and things like that, that's the case. So what I would say is, the first thing to do is take a big deep breath, sit and do an emergency budget, sit and write on the back of an envelope or a piece of paper, whatever. It doesn't need to be complicated, doesn't need to involve spreadsheets if that's not the thing, but just sit and go, hang on, what have I got coming in and what are my absolute urgents, what's coming out and when, so you know where you are.
And don't stick your head in the sand.
Which we all do, don't get me wrong, we all do it, and we hate looking at it and going, I'm paying how much for what? Yeah, exactly. But if you know what's coming in, what's going out. You absolutely have to pay, and also when, because I think that sometimes trips people up. Well, I've got a loan payment coming out from the car on that day. I've forgotten about that. I think, and then once you've got that rough idea, then talk to people. So I know a lot of credit card companies are doing pausing. If you've got a credit card bill that you're worried about, you can pause the payment on that. You can apply for a mortgage holiday if you're lucky enough to own your own home and you've got a mortgage. You can apply for a mortgage holiday. You have to evidence that you need it. It's not something they're just giving out willy-nilly, but you can apply for that. And they're the really big bills that otherwise you might lose your home or you might not be able to eat. They're the really difficult, they're the ones that need to be dealt with first. You can pause. I know a lot of things like TV subscription services, you can pause those if you can't afford them. And a lot of the companies that you will be paying things back to have got provision at the moment for you to either pause bills or reduce them. So certainly I'd say work out what you're paying, work out what you've got, and then go and talk to people. That's the first thing. There's lots more advice online about various places you can go and get in terms of pausing bills or reducing bills. But first of all, talk to someone.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think renting is a really difficult area because obviously, particularly if you're in private renting, you still need to pay your rent to your landlord. But I'd say talk to your landlord. And a lot of landlords are saying you can take a pause on your rent and we can sort it out later. And landlords can apply for mortgage holidays if they can prove that their tenant is struggling to pay the rent, and it won't affect their credit rating. So if you're a tenant talking to your landlord, you can reassure them that they could get that and it won't affect them. So it's just a case of, I mean, obviously it's in the landlord's gift to do that, but it's definitely worth approaching a landlord if you're worried about your rent.
The consistent message I'm hearing is don't stick your head in the sand and do go and talk to people. We all know the situation we're in. You've not done anything wrong. You're just reflecting what's going on around you. So face it and get some help. When we were talking earlier, we were talking about how part of the stuff about money issues is not just getting the practical advice you need, but it's actually the kind of headspace of how do I feel? And, maybe there's a sense of shame about what did I do to get into this mess? There's a sense of I don't want to tell anybody. I don't want people to know that I'm really struggling. And there's massive anxiety, especially if it's not just you, but other people who are depending on you. As churches, if someone comes to us in this position, sure, we can ring you up and ask for lots of practical advice and we can pass that on. But just at the level of feeling, how do we respond?
I think that's a really good point, actually, and it's something that we don't like talking about money in the best of times, do we? It's one of those things that we very rarely ask even those very close to us about money situations, but yet right now everybody is sort of slightly floundering, and I think it's actually opening up some really interesting conversations. So I'd say don't shy away from it. Like you said, nobody's done anything wrong here, and actually there's no shame in this. We're all in the situation together that people are from one day to the next not really sure what's happening with jobs and with income and that kind of thing. There's no shame in asking for help. There's no shame in letting people know where you're at, but equally there's no shame in asking someone. And if you can actually if you're worried about somebody in your congregation or in your parish or in your community, just go, how are you doing? And sometimes I hate talking about money, even though it's my job. I hate talking about it. And I've got a friend who I know is freelance, and I thought I just need to check in with her because I don't know how she's doing. And I practiced beforehand. I had a little practice. I thought, what am I going to say? What words am I going to say? And I just said, how's work? Are you going to be able to carry on working? Do you know where your income's coming from? And immediately we had a conversation about it where she was able to open up, and it was a really nice option. Give people an option to talk if they want to. Of course, some people won't want to, but if they want to, I think giving people an option. I think, again, put all those key listening skills into practice. People don't always want advice straight away. They just want to be heard. And I think particularly when it comes to money, it might be that they haven't talked to anyone else about it. I think opening up about money can be quite a difficult thing. So when someone does it, it's really good to just sit and listen and to sort of say, yeah, I hear that. I hear what you say. One thing we've got to be really careful about though is not to give money advice out. So we can do an awful lot as a church. There's a lot of things we can do, but we shouldn't be giving specific money advice. We can't tell them what to do with their money or what they shouldn't do with their money. We can point them to really good sources of information. We can make sure they're informed, and we can hear what they're feeling. That's fine. All of those things are really important. We've just got to be really careful not to say, well, you should definitely not do that, or you should definitely do that, because that's the sort of thing that you have to be licensed and insured to do, and we shouldn't be taking that on.
So listen, care, signpost, but don't advise.
Yes, absolutely. But I think one of the things we can always say to anyone is, there is a way out of this. There are solutions, and there are ways we can work, ways we can get this dealt with and get this solved. It might not be very, very pleasant, but it's much better than not facing it. Actually, as soon as you face these things and you deal with them, the worry is halved, because you've actually started the process of trying to help. So yeah.
And we really want churches to say to people, you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
We'll do what we can to stand with you in it. And I know that through the work of Capital Mass, you'll be aware of lots of other ways that churches are helping as well. You know, food banks, there's the amazing yourneighbour.org organisation that's matching volunteers with where there's need. There are community mutual aid groups popping up. Do you want to highlight some of those things that you found have been particularly useful in this situation?
Yeah, there's a huge number, and it's ever evolving, isn't it? I think one of the if there's a silver lining to this awful situation we're in, is that actually seeing neighbourliness and love and community spirit has just been extraordinary, and amongst churches and community groups all over London that I've heard of. And just in terms of, there's a brilliant organisation called Acts 435, which I'd love to highlight, that a lot of churches are registered with Acts 435, and if you're not thinking about, I would recommend thinking about it. They're a great organisation. You can post on their website a request for money for somebody. So if you know somebody who's really struggling and just needs an extra 50 or 60 quid to pay something, you can put an advert on their website, and then it's crowdfunded across the UK. People just put in £10, £20, £30, whatever. And then when that money is raised, it's given to you as an organisation, as a church or as a community group, and then you're able to pass that on. So in terms of people really struggling for money, or perhaps need to buy a pair of shoes for their children or something like that, being an Acts 435 church is a really good way of doing that, to get small amounts of money to people. I think you can only do up to about £125, something like that. So it's not about filling a massive gap, it's just a little gap.
Make a bit of a difference when it's really needed.
Exactly, and it's a practical way of showing love to somebody and being really relational with that, because you know the person, you know what they need. So I'd recommend that. As I say, the Your Neighbour website is excellent, because there's so many ways for the local church to just be very neighbourly, actually, and go, I'm here, we're here, let's do what we can, and all helping each other. I think one of the things about this is we're all in different ways struggling, and actually being vulnerable with each other is a really powerful thing that's been happening. So a lot of the mutual aid groups that have popped up have been really helpful. A lot of churches and church members have been really involved in those, and they're often WhatsApp groups or Facebook groups, or even just lists of phone numbers where you said, I'll help you get your shopping if you need me to, and if I get ill, you can help me. And I think there's a really lovely mutuality of that's great.
Well, and one day when this is over, I don't want us to go back. I want this to change us as a church and as a society, that if we become more neighbourly because of it, that will be a really good thing. And also, if we start talking about stuff, whether that's money or mental health or domestic violence or all kinds of other different needs that we all have, just to be a little bit more vulnerable with each other, that for me would be a sign of resurrection and of hope. I don't want to go back.
Absolutely, I think that's absolutely right. Yes, and actually, as we realise we can be vulnerable with each other, and actually, it's quite a healing thing, isn't it? To say, I actually need your help as much as you need my help. None of us are experts, but we can all be alongside each other. Absolutely, I'll say a big amen to that. We have just final thing to say is we have put together a PDF resource. Just with a lot of this information, and I've rattled through a lot of stuff very quickly, and quite a lot of it is not very much detail, but if you do want more detail, we have put together that resource. It's completely shareable with anybody. It's on our website, and we'll try and keep it updated as things change in terms of government response. But a lot of the links to people who are doing really good money advice stuff, and there are some brilliant charities and organisations where you can go and, for example, check what you're eligible for and benefits, that sort of thing. They'll be signposted in that document.
Yeah, so we'll make sure that's available on the Capital Mass website and on the Diocese of London website, and you can look for at both of those websites already for lots of resources that can point you in the right direction, and any queries you can also get in touch by email. Alison, thanks. It's been great to hear your expertise and to have your time, and I think I just want to say, I think one of the messages we both heard is don't do this alone. Reach out and ask for help, and the church will stand with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.